Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. What do a conservative podcast episode, an announcement about In-N-Out leaving California, the latest bill on redistricting, a deadly car crash in Florida, and our governor's posts on X all have to do with each other? I believe that there is a connecting thread through all of these stories that we've seen lately in the news, and that is when our government leaders show us who they are, we should believe them. I'll get into all of it today, but before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you stay up to date on all things California politics. And if you want more information on sources cited in compiling today's episode, then you should check out my corresponding article on my website, which is linked below. All right, I am so excited to dive into all of these stories with you today because as I have seen them popping up in the news, I have thought, I want to talk about that and I want to talk about that. But they've all been stories that I hadn't thought were quite big enough or make enough of a point for me to cover in their own episode of the show. But like I mentioned in the opening, I believe that all these stories are connected and they teach us a very important lesson about leadership. Now, why is it important that we be talking about this lesson today? Let me set the scene for you. We are just a year out from the 2026 midterms. And I know that can sound a little bit crazy we still have over a year, so why do we need to be thinking about it? But if you recall, I did an episode of this show back a few months ago about Chad Bianco and his views when he announced his run for governor. And at the time, it sounded like the midterms are so far away. Why are we even talking about this? Would you believe that was back in March and now we are in August? And so much time has passed and it has gone so quickly. So this year is going to fly by and sooner rather than later, you are going to have to make a decision about who you want to vote for in our state, not just for the role of governor, but for other positions in our legislature and in our government as well as local governments as well. So it is more important than ever that we talk about how to exercise discernment when it comes to who we want to support, who we want to advocate for, and ultimately who we want to be voting for. Now, our state of California offers us the perfect case study for looking at leadership and looking at how they interact with the people who they were elected to lead. And none other than our current sitting governor, Gavin Newsom, also gives us quite a case study with looking at how he has led our state, the choices that he has made, and how, again, he's interacted with the constituents who are under his care. And boy, oh boy, do we have material to work with. So to that end, let's dive into some recent stories that I think will really drive this point home. First up, you may have seen a few weeks ago that Governor Newsom sat down for a 4-hour-long podcast interview on the Sean Ryan Show, which is a more conservative-leaning podcast. And during this time, they sat down just to talk about anything and everything. And so inevitably, they talked a lot about Governor Newsom's views as well as his record of governance. Now, I'll be honest. I did not listen to the entire 4-hour interview. And if you did, then you should drop a comment letting me know what you thought, because I tried. I literally tried. I thought it would be so good to listen to the whole thing, so I was very prepared to relay a lot of what happened to you guys, maybe debunk some claims. And I got about 20 to 30 minutes into it, and I couldn't do it. And the reasons I couldn't do it were because of all of the lying, all of the obfuscating, all of the refusing to answer a simple question, or just the manipulation of basic facts to basically be saying things that were just blatantly untrue, but couldn't really go challenged because it was really confusing how he was doing it. So I just couldn't get through it. Hopefully some of you maybe did. I don't even know if that's a worthwhile use of time. But anyway, all of that to say, there were a few points early on in what I did here that I think made it very clear that Governor Newsom was not going to try to be honest and explain his actions and his policies in this podcast, but rather he was going to try to protect his image. I mean, just a few minutes into the interview, he made the outlandish claim that the California Exodus narrative is complete bad word that I am not going to say, which is completely crazy because it is obvious to any of us living in California and many of you who maybe have left California that people are leaving in droves. I mean, I saw headlines way back in 2020 that they were even out of U-Hauls or moving trucks in California because all of them have moved out of California, moving people, and they needed them to return in order to bring them back for people to use. And so I just wanted to break down some of the facts because Governor Newsom is calling it a complete hoax. He is saying that California is doing better than ever population-wise, that people are moving into the state. And so it's just all made up. But the facts are that between 2010 and 2023, so a huge gap of time, about 9.2 million people have left California for other states, and only 6.7 million have moved in. So that's a net loss of about 2.5 million people over that long time period. And if you want to look at more recently, then in 2024, the state experienced net negative domestic migration of about 240,000 residents. So what that means is that when you look at domestic migration, California is at a net loss. So that means that people who live in the United States and people who live in California are choosing to leave the state. And actually, more people are choosing to leave the state than people who are coming in. The only reason that California has people moving into the state largely is due to foreign immigration. So people who have not lived in the United States are choosing to come to California, which isn't surprising. California is a hub. Los Angeles is a hub. And it also has a lot of immigrant communities. And so it makes sense that people might choose from a different country to move here. But people who have lived here for any extended period of time are choosing to actually leave the state for other states. And I don't really think that that's a ridiculous hoax that should be brushed off by the main guy leading the state. If people who live here are citing problems with your state and saying that they would rather go live somewhere like Texas, Tennessee, or Florida, then wouldn't you want to ask, what is it about those states that is so attractive to people who live in the US and maybe have been here for years? What is causing people to literally leave their families, to leave communities that they've lived in their entire lives? So again, as the person leading our state, why wouldn't you want to ask those questions and dig in and see if there are things that can be learned, lessons that can be learned, things that can be changed in order to help families and help people continue to choose California over other states? So that was the first crazy thing that he said. Then he started to launch into presenting himself as a pro-Second Amendment moderate. And really, Newsom saying that he is pro-Second Amendment, it's just gaslighting. And gaslighting, if you don't know, is when someone says something that's blatantly untrue, something that you know is untrue because you've experienced it, and they try to convince you that you're just wrong. You're crazy that you ever thought that. And so the reason that this is gaslighting is because you can look at California and we all know this is not a gun-friendly state. This is a very restrictive state when it comes to gun rights. And so I just want to list a few facts for you. Even recently, Newsom signed an 11% excise tax on firearms and ammunition. I actually have an episode on this a few months ago because that was effective from 2024. Under Newsom's administration, California limited the public carry of concealed firearms in sensitive locations and raised the minimum age for concealed carry permits to 21. Newsom expanded and tightened background checks on gun purchasers and broadened California's red flag law provisions. And he's even advocated for a federal constitutional amendment to increase gun control nationwide. And this would include raising that minimum purchase age for firearms to 21 across the entire country and requiring universal reasonable waiting periods for sales. So this just insane. All of these laws go to show you that he is incredibly restrictive, and he wishes that nationwide that all of your rights under the Second Amendment would be restricted and eaten away at. And so he claims that these are common sense reforms, but we can see clearly that he's just anti-gun. And all of that was just in the 20-minute portion that I listened to. So clearly there was so much more because the whole thing was 4 hours long. But we have more stories to cover today, so we need to move on from this one to the next one. And that is the shocking announcement about In-N-Out Burger, the beloved fast food chain in California. The heiress who has inherited In-N-Out Burger, Lindsay Snyder, revealed that she and her family are actually relocating from California to Tennessee. And what that means for In-N-Out Burger is they're not closing down their California stores. Their locations are going to remain open. But right now they have 2 headquarters, both in the state. They're going to merge those into one California headquarter, and then they're going to open a new headquarters in Tennessee. And really the game plan from here on out is to start expanding more eastward and kind of slow how things have been in California. So no longer will In-N-Out be a California brand. Now you'll be able to find it in other states like Tennessee. And I just want to quote the reasons for why she is saying they are leaving California, both personally and for the business. She said, quote, "There's a lot of great things about California, but raising a family is not easy here. Doing business is not easy here." And then she went on to refer to high costs, regulatory challenges, and COVID-era mandates that made operations feel just completely untenable. So this signals a bit of a wake-up call. You have this chain that has been very California exclusive for decades. They've been incredibly loyal to the state. And now the people who created that chain are leaving the state where they created their business, and they're taking their business and they're going to expand it elsewhere. And so really it's a red alarm for saying, what is California doing that is so unfriendly to businesses that one business that has been incredibly successful and has thrived throughout the state is even taking themselves and putting there somewhere else, which arguably is more of a risk for In-N-Out versus sticking with the model that they've known. But once again, Governor Newsom took to X, actually his office took to X, and really seemed to downplay the significance of this shift. He said, for those interested in the facts rather than fiction, In-N-Out is expanding east, creating a second HQ in Tennessee. In-N-Out continues to expand in California, adding more locations in the Golden State this year than any other state. So is it true that In-N-Out is expanding? Yes. Is it true that they are leaving their California stores open to be successful and thrive? Yes. However, he's completely missing the point. He's jumping over the obvious shift here, which is she herself is saying that they are leaving California because it's been difficult, because it's been challenging. And of course, they're not just going to shut down hundreds of locations in the state where their business is operating. That would be insane and would be suicidal for the entire business. But Newsom and others in our state who care about the economy, who care about businesses thriving, who care about even just the culture of California and having some brands that are unique to us, they should really sit up and take notice here that now California is going to expand to other places. And in the future, as those places become more successful, they might start to really move things away from California because, like they said, it's challenging, it's difficult, and they have found that they can't stay here. So once again, the frustration here lies in the optics of Governor Newsom just brushing off the concerns that concerned citizens like Lindsay Snyder and others who have lived here faithfully are raising up, instead of addressing them and saying, oh my goodness, we want to be friendly to business. We want people to want to stay in California. Instead, he is not saying that. And he's just saying, it's all made up. You don't need to be concerned. We're not even going to address the fact that they're opening another headquarters specifically because of problems that they have seen taking place in California. All right, we are down 2 stories through 5, and I know that running through all of these stories can be a lot to take in. It can be very overwhelming and even exhausting. But the good news is that with partners like 7 Weeks Coffee, they can help you stay informed, stay energized in order to be up to date on everything happening. 7 Weeks Coffee is a family-owned company that is determined to live out its Christian values in the marketplace while providing you a high-quality product. They make incredible coffee that is free of toxins, it is low acidity, and it's organically farmed. Instead of paying their farmers mere pennies on the dollar or selling you coffee that is infested with mold or other toxic chemicals, they know the farmers that they work with in order to bring you this product, and they make sure that it is a high quality that you can feel good about drinking each and every morning. But the best part is their mission. Did you know that at 7 weeks development, in utero, a baby is the size of a coffee bean and a heartbeat is clearly detectable? As a company, 10% of their proceeds go toward helping pro-life pregnancy centers around the United States. And as a company, they've been able to donate over $1 million because of faithful supporters like you who made the switch from toxic coffee, if companies who don't support your values, over to them who do support your Christian and conservative values. So if you love coffee and you love babies, then you should use my discount code TESSABRAHAM to get 10% off all of their amazing products. This is a really practical way that we can vote with our dollars in the marketplace, that we can switch from big companies like Starbucks, who again are directly opposed to our values, and we can support a great product, drinking great coffee, while also helping to save unborn lives and push back against the culture that says that abortion is the only option. So check them out today, see if you're ready to make the switch, and if you are, then use my discount code TESSABRAHAM at checkout to get 10% off and to support the show. Okay, back to our stories. Next up is redistricting, and we just talked about this 2 weeks ago, so you are well informed on what is happening. You know that Governor Newsom is passing legislation in order to be able to redraw the district maps across California, and he is claiming that he's doing this in response to gerrymandering in Texas, but that's pretty questionable looking at Texas motives versus California's motives in doing this. And there's been a lot of backlash, including former Republican Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and people speaking out against this move as a blatant power grab. And as we discussed a few weeks ago, that's clearly what it is. Governor Newsom doesn't like the idea of Republicans gaining more seats in the House of Representatives. He is just saying that, well, if Republicans get 5 seats from Texas, then I'm going to take away 5 seats in California, which should not be how it works. Anyway, that's all the recap of what's happening. But that isn't even the worst of it, because at the same time, amidst all of this battle with Trump, with Texas, with all of the talks about redistricting, he has also embraced a very mocking tone on X that actually seems very reminiscent of President Trump's tweets. And so I just want to look at some of these. I mean, look at these examples with the all caps lock posts, with memes, with provocative taunts meant to mirror Trump's social media tactics, also mirroring Trump's voice. And this is a prime example of political theater. And I just want to pause for a minute because I know that there have been a lot of people who are saying, well, Newsom is just mimicking Trump, and you're not upset at what Trump is posting on X or Truth Social or wherever Trump posts. And so it's hypocritical of you to be upset that Governor Newsom is doing it. If you think that this is childish of Newsom, then you should think it's childish of Trump. But what I want to emphasize here is that good leadership isn't about just matching someone else's tactics or style or voice. It's instead about if you're going to rise above whatever you are critical of. So Governor Newsom is critical of Donald Trump, and a lot on the left side of the aisle are very critical of him and even of his style and his rhetoric. And so the idea that he is just going to copy it and he is just going to lean into it and start doing exactly what Trump is doing really is more hypocritical of him, because if he thinks that it's wrong and if he thinks that it's not presidential, then shouldn't he be acting in the way that he thinks a good leader should act? But then at the same time, if you like Trump's style of being direct, which many conservatives value and don't really see a problem with what Trump is doing, the reason that we like that in Trump, or the reason that we at least aren't offended by it, is because it's authentic to who he is. Trump has his own style. He's a bit of a character. And I'm not here to defend Trump. You can have problems with him. I don't think he's the best person in the world. However, we all can see why he got votes in 2016, and we can see why he got votes last year in 2024. There's something about him that people like, and part of that is authenticity. And so when someone else comes along and just copies that in order to mock it or make fun of it, clearly that is not authentic on their part. That simply is childish. And really, this just points to the fact that leaders who believe that their ideas are good and right and true don't need gimmicks or political theater in order to prop them up. They can win over the majority of people simply on their ideas alone. And arguably, that's what we saw President Trump do in the last election. People saw what wasn't working across the nation. Donald Trump came out and said very clearly what his views were, and people voted for him because they were voting for an ideology. If Governor Newsom is so certain in his ideologies, then he doesn't need to be mocking Trump, and he doesn't need to be acting like a 5-year-old. So really, this just shows that this type of political opposition doesn't really seem to make him appear as strong. It really just makes him seem unoriginal, reactive, and focused on his rival instead of his goal of supporting the Californian people. Okay, so for our last story of today, we have to talk about the absolutely devastating car crash that just happened down in Florida. And if you didn't hear about it, there was an illegal immigrant here from India who was driving a commercial, like a giant van or giant truck in Florida, and decided to take an illegal U-turn while he was on the turnpike. And because of that, he actually ended up creating an accident where a normal passenger van slammed into him. There were 3 people in the car, and all 3 people died on scene. Now, the controversy about this is the man actually wasn't from Florida. He was originally in the United States from California. He's from India, but then he came to California, and California issued him a commercial driver's license. And that is specifically because of the policy position that California takes in regards to illegal immigration that says we will issue driver's licenses and we will issue commercial driver's licenses to illegal immigrants without needing them to have proper status, proper documentation here, and without any questions asked. And so people are outraged not just at the man who committed the crime, but also at the state of California for enabling this type of a reckless behavior. But of course, California has taken absolutely no responsibility for this. Governor Newsom has instead focused on saying that California followed the law, that the law here in California is that as an illegal immigrant, you can get a driver's license, that you have opportunities to even get a commercial's driver's license and be driving these giant trucks, which can be used as a weapon if not operated properly, that because that's law here, nothing was done wrong in California, and that if people are mad, then they should take it up with federal immigration authorities or other entities who are responsible for it and not California. But that isn't addressing the root cause of the problem, which is bad policy. California could have been a safeguard to say, no, if you're here illegally, then we are not granting you a commercial's driver's license. That's not even just a normal driver's license. And maybe you want to argue, well, they need a driver's license to get around. I still think that's ridiculous because they're here illegally. But regardless, California's taken this policy position and it's going to have repercussions. And one of the repercussions is that people with bad motives or people who are not willing to take the time to be responsible to learn how to drive these trucks are then going to get into bad accidents like this and kill 3 people. That is a huge human toll at the cost of bad policy. Okay, so I know that was a lot. Let's circle back and let's zoom out and look at the thread that is the common denominator in all of these stories. And that is, like I mentioned, California's leaders are showing us who they are, what their character is like, and we need to believe them. Our very own governor lies thinking that we won't notice. He dismisses the concerns of citizens and businesses like In-N-Out who are deciding to move their operations elsewhere. He is grandstanding and is so out of touch with the issues that real Californians care about, and instead is just posting on X and trying to mock the president, and instead is grandstanding on issues like redistricting that Californians are not concerned with every day because we're more concerned about how we're going to afford to live here. And worst of all, he avoids responsibility for the very clear outcomes of the policies that he supports, that he enacts, and that he says are good. And so when leaders behave this way, we need to believe that this is who they are, and we can't expect that anything will change across our state until our very leadership changes, until people like Gavin Newsom no longer retain power. Instead, as long as the Gavin Newsoms of California are in power, things will just continue to go as they have been going and as these stories have shown. And that's why we need to look honestly at this type of behavior, and we need to discern how we can actually affect change. Because the truth is that even though it's discouraging to look at the actions of our current governor, not all leaders act this way. There are better leaders, leaders with qualities and attributes that would prevent them from doing the very things that we've seen Newsom do. And so some of the qualities that we should be looking for are truthfulness. We should be looking for humility. We should be looking for authenticity. And we should be looking for leaders with a people-first mindset. We've seen that these are all traits that are really severely lacking in Governor Newsom, and they've come out through some of his antics in politics. But if we find a leader with these traits, then we can see better and actual and genuine leadership throughout our state that will lead to real change. And so this is the type of person who we should look for to run our state. Not just the popular ones, not just the loudest ones, but the ones who actually have our best interests at heart. And my favorite example of a leader who is like this is, of course, our 33rd governor of California, Ronald Reagan. And when it came to things like truthfulness and humility and authenticity, we have so many examples of how Reagan put this on display. In fact, he was called the great communicator. And this just wasn't just for his speeches or his ability for public speaking, but it was for his clarity. He explained complex issues in a way that normal, everyday people like you and me could understand, and so that people could understand the actual effects of the policies that he wanted to enact. This requires truthfulness. When it came to humility, Reagan was known for self-deprecating humor. He could take a good joke. He even joked after he was shot when he was president that he hoped that his doctors were all Republicans. And really, it didn't matter because people could still love him, they could still admire him, they could still hope the best for him, regardless of his political party. And then when it came to authenticity, Reagan was very steady under pressure. I mean, if you think about his time as governor, there was campus unrest, there were riots, there was also a tough budget climate climate. And he showed firmness, but he also showed pragmatism, sticking to the things that he actually valued and trying to get good work done for everyday Californians, regardless of whether it was popular or not. He made tough calls that actually would not flesh out until the long term. And so they were unpopular in the short term, but he knew that long term they would be better for people. And that is so rare to find today. But that is exactly what we need in a leader, is not someone only thinking about the next 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, and their tenure in whatever office they're going to be in, but someone who's actually thinking about the greater good for the people around them. And then lastly, Reagan didn't just try to score partisan points. He was thinking about people. His appeal was broader. In California, he had to work with a Democrat-controlled legislature, and that can be really hard when you're a conservative governor. But he worked alongside them and with them to make real changes in our state, to find compromises, and then he would carry that into his presidency. And that's what made his appeals so popular. So we can't just say that we want better leaders. We can't just criticize Gavin Newsom and then vote for someone who acts exactly like him. We have to actually try to make changes, to seek out these qualities in leaders, and to champion good leaders when we see them. But now, you might be thinking, all of that sounds great, and I agree with it, but Tess, I do that. I have voted for the good guys. I have looked at their track records. I have done my research. I have tried to get the Gavin Newsoms of California out of office, and nothing has worked. And to that, I just want to pause because that is so real. The frustration is real. And probably most of you, if you are conservative, are voting for the people who I am saying that we should vote for. And you're thinking, I agree that everything Gavin Newsom is doing is wrong, and I don't want him to be governor. So what am I supposed to do when it seems like everyone around me is still voting for him, but I'm doing the right thing and not seeing change? And so to that, I just want to encourage you once again, as I've said before, that voting is important and real, and it's our first line of defense in this fight. But voting is not the only thing that we can be doing. And so with that, we also have to be looking around us. We have to be showing up in the time between the actual elections where we get to cast our ballot, because voting is just the effect of the change that we see in public opinion. And you change public opinion by informing the people who are having the opinions and who are voting. And so we can't give up on those conversations around us. Now, I would bet you that there are people around you who either are conservatives or Christians who don't agree with what Gavin Newsom is doing, but they are not informed. They don't think that politics is important. They don't think that they have anything in this fight. They just think it's too hard, it's too sad, there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm not going to show up. Or there are also probably people around you who just believe Gavin Newsom. Maybe they watch the mainstream media and that's it for them. They don't question anything. And so they don't actually know that there are times where he is lying or obfuscating or refusing to answer a question. And so those are the people who we need to be engaging with. And if you believe first and foremost that your voice matters, that you need to show up for this, and that politics matter, then it will be even easier to convince them because it will just be an authentic part of what you genuinely believe. History shows us that perseverance matters. Even with Reagan, he didn't win his first race for governor. He had to keep showing up and believing that if he worked hard enough and he changed enough hearts and minds, he could enact real change. And we can do the same thing, but we can't throw up our hands and give up, as I say so often as this show, and as you know is true. The best way to change public opinion is by showing the actual real-life consequences of the policies that are enacted by our leaders. And so that's why we show up here every week to talk about those real-life consequences, but it can't end there. We have to keep informing people around us with grace, with kindness, and with clarity. So here's the thing to remember. Cynicism guarantees that nothing will change, but perseverance and passion actually start to take the baby steps to get us there. And then it prepares us so that when the right leader rises up, we actually support them. And that, my friends, is how change actually takes root. Before you go, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Connected Care, an online therapy platform making quality mental health support more accessible than ever. Whether you're dealing with anxiety, depression, or whatever is going on in life, Connected Care connects you with licensed professionals who truly want to help. They also offer medical support to anyone who has medication as part of their mental health care plan. And if you are a provider and you are not a patient, then they also handle administrative components for you, like billing, credentialing, insurance, and so much more, so that you can focus on your clients and not on the paperwork. Get started today at connectedcareinc.com. That's connectedcareinc.com from the comfort of your own home. Because no one should face mental health challenges alone, and thanks to Connected Care, you don't have to. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was helpful for you as you navigate life in our state and that you even learned something new. Please spread the word and share this show with your friends, family, and fellow Californians. And I'll see you back here next week for another episode of the California Conversation.